first podcast of the year, first podcast of the new season.
I'm honored.
Aren't you so much happier that you waited to do it till now?
I am. Yeah, this is legit now. We have, we're in the library. We upgraded.
It's crazy to me to think that we were having a conversation just like this, like a year ago, almost exactly, in your dad's house in LA.
Yeah. Yeah, that was nuts.
Yeah, it's like you went from like kind of like engineer to like full stack founder.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I was still a founding engineer at Founders Inc. I had like just joined Founders Inc.
Oh yeah, you had just joined.
Yeah.
No, it's crazy.
Yeah, we were out in LA and we met up with like Labib and all them, and we had that combo about
Abe was
like,
there,
where are we going to be in a year? Where are we going to be in 10 years?
Yeah, dude. It feels like such a long time ago. And now it's like, what, in the last year, you kind of built a company. You raised 1.4 million. And I don't know if I could say this, but you also made that company worth $1 million. What can
off the record, you know.
What am I allowed to say? What's the official valuation?
Yeah, you know, like I guess valued it above 10 million. I guess it makes you a paper millionaire. Not, you know, I try not to pay too much attention to that. Just continue to build the company. And
valuations are valuations. Yeah.
It'll work itself out. You know how VC is, you know, it's inflated, I think. But definitely the past year has been pretty crazy, life-changing.
So yeah, what happened?
So I guess I'll start with like quick background on me. I basically came out to San Francisco a year and a half ago.
One-way ticket.
Booked a one-way, you know, that's what I say. Booked a one-way ticket. I grew up in New Jersey. I was, you know, in New York working on startups, realized that SF was the place to be, came out here, basically showed up outside of Founders Inc. one day and was like, hey, I know Farza. Can I work here for a day? Ended up getting invited back and ended up joining Founders Inc. as a founding engineer. Then in February last year, we started Leap. So we worked on a couple projects before that, but really when we started Leap in February, I went from an engineer to focusing on growth and really starting at like square zero, but very quickly learning. And I think the big inflection point was, you know, I think I always had like a natural thing for content, but then pairing that with Twitter and in March was really the inflection point of we, you know, do a couple like influencer campaigns. And then one day we do this one and the tweet just goes absolutely ballistic. It's at 1 million impressions in like a few hours. Then it's at 2 million. Then Elon Musk replies to it and it just soars. It goes to 16 million. And that's when I think I saw the power of that sort of distribution. And we were looking for at the time like a 10x for our business, and that was a 35x. So in a day, we actually went from, you know, whatever the lifetime I think of signups to the service at the time was like maybe 10,000, and then in a day we like more than doubled it. Yeah.
So to recap, first, what is Leap? What was it then?
So
and what
Leap
is
at
it
the
now?
time was a very easy API to add AI features to your app. So this was right when, you know, ChatGPT had come out. There's a lot of hype around what type of apps could you build with AI, specifically in the image space. So
this is when everyone made like the AI headshots.
Yeah, like, you know, the avatars popped off and, you know, that app did like 2 million in a month or something. And it was really hard for developers to spin up, you know, pipelines to run GPUs that would run Stable Diffusion or Dream Booth or some of the AI models that could do this next generation stuff. And we made it very easy. We just gave you, you know, an API you could ping and say, generate an image, pass the prompt and get the image back. And so that was the first product. And then we had to figure out, okay, we have this API. How do we get people to build on it? And so you put your growth hat on. What we did at the start was a lot of spray and pray. So I guess I can like take you through the journey of, you know, like learning social and learning sort of, we tried paid ads, then we tried influencer. We've dabbled with affiliate, we've done SEO. So really kind of going from that moment in March all the way to where we are now, which is, you know, sort of the framework I have of how you grow you know, any product or service bottoms up versus top down. Like we can go into that.
Yeah.
I think I've, you know, really picked up, and I've seen along the way, not just Leap, but all the other apps in Founders Inc. and that you've seen kind of pop off generally. I've seen the playbooks from behind the scenes.
Yeah, I mean, so you were one of like the first. I think you were the first studio company of our second batch.
Yep.
And I remember being in this room actually, and Furkan was like, okay, like he was very aggressive about growth.
Yep.
Straight roasting you.
Well, so let's start there. So most builders, they'll build in a silo and they don't tell anyone. So they just keep silently building features and they think they can build features and that makes them win. And the first thing Furkan said when I remember this studio session, he sat down and he was like, you guys don't even have a scoreboard. So like you got to get a scoreboard, and the scoreboard is ultimately, end of the day, it's revenue.
Yeah.
Unless you're
a social app,
but you're not. Just take, you think you are, you're not.
We both build social apps.
Yeah, we both build social apps.
App.
Like count, revenue is your scoreboard. And so then it's not about shipping features like up to a certain point, because we have a lot of builders here. It's actually about, I remember one of the first things is like ship a feature, tell someone, it's not shipped until it's off localhost and you've tweeted about it, posted about it, send an email blast. And so we started with just doing that organic stuff and being consistent every day. We would ship something and almost like we want you to scroll through your feed and be like, damn, like I keep seeing Leap show up. Like they really ship. And then you get to a certain point of, okay, like we've saturated that initial audience. What's going to actually drive top of funnel and qualified traffic? And that's where we get to the other sort of strats.
I remember in the early days, it was like suddenly you went from, I'm pretty sure you didn't post on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
And then suddenly I remember I started seeing like, I'm building this new company. It's called Leap.
Yeah.
You kind of did the whole like personal brand, founder journey, build in public stuff.
Build in public's huge. I think, okay, so like maybe I'll try to break down the whole story, right? We start, no one cares. You're like no one knows you, and build in public is how, look at like Peter Levels, Danny Postma, like they've built massive followings because the advantage you have when no one cares or knows you is that you're the underdog in the story and you can build, you can in public show how you go from 0 to 1 to 100. Mm-hmm. And so we did that every week, every Monday I would post, here are the metrics, and every week they would be going up. Right. Yeah. And so, and even when they didn't really go up, sometimes it would just be like, we did more of whatever, signups is sort of a vanity metric. But then revenue actually eventually did go up. But like I said, so basically we're building in public. We saturate our initial audience of like f.inc people. You're going to hit this, like you're 100 followers or 1,000 followers, they get saturated. You got to figure out how to branch into a wider audience. So for us, what we tried initially was just paid, and we sprayed and prayed across. We did Twitter, Reddit, Google, and YouTube, and nothing really like popped. Like our CAC was pretty bad. And then we tried DevRel. So DevRel was sort of like, who are the influencers in the developer space? And how do we do actual like educational content to activate them?
So essentially it's like you went from the typical, I'm going to run Facebook ads, to then, you build a story around the brand.
Yeah.
My question is, how were you running Facebook ads? Was it like actually coming up with creatives, A/B testing campaigns?
Yeah, exactly. It was very much like spreadsheet, and we ran at least probably like a dozen experiments a week on just different creative, different copy, and different across different platforms.
Why don't you think it worked then?
Well, it worked in the sense like we got signups. Like we were doing Google Ads and we were getting like initially maybe 500, 1,000 signups a week. It just like here's another lesson. Like everything will work. Everything can work. It's just a question of the numbers. And so we approached it very much from like an engineer's mindset of like, what are we paying and what are we getting out? And just driving down basically the CAC on which channels we were getting the best return on. And very quickly it went from, okay, we could keep putting money into paid, but we just did this, DevRel influencer strat that basically, like I said, 35x the business.
Yeah. I remember you guys were one of the first to do like the paid influencer tweets that didn't really look like,
didn't
like
really
paid.
look
Now,
like,
when you open Twitter, it's like you see like Hassan and like all these guys that we worked with. Every other tweet is just like, here's this new ChatGPT killer
it's
that you've
always
never
like
really heard
something
about.
died. It's always something is rip designers.
Yeah,
rip
Photoshop
engineers.
is dead.
Yeah, Photoshop.
I'm pretty sure
is
you guys
dead.
probably used that at some point.
I think we might have patented it, honestly. Like yeah. So, but I think zooming out, like the overall strategy we're executing on is sort of like, if you have anything and you're thinking about how do you grow it, you can either go like top down or bottoms up.
What does that mean?
And what that means is like, imagine, and it correlates to whatever your business model is, right? So if you're a consumer app, very likely you're going to go bottoms up, meaning that the distribution is going to be a wide flux of individuals signing up to a platform, going through some loop and converting self-serve, right?
Okay.
Versus on a top-down model, like I'm going for 10 enterprise clients that are all like, going to pay me 6 or 7 figures. And likely it's very relationship based. It's very one-to-one, but those like those individual people are extremely valuable versus the bottoms up approach is I'm going to pour a lot of people in. Some of them are not going to be qualified or they might pay me only, 10, 20 bucks a month. But there's going to be a ton. There's going to be 1,000 that are paying me, some small amount.
So obviously when you put it like that, it's like you want to optimize for, I think you said it was the top down, that's why B2B SaaS is like, what it is. You can generate a lot of money. Your profit margins are generally pretty high. But then how did you guys go from like essentially nobody's in the space, very little followings, first time building a company public, to then, now you've worked with Zapier and I can't even remember the other companies you guys have partnered with, like Vercel.
Yeah.
So how did that happen?
Yeah. So, well, I'll say, listen, there's no like the best approach is what type of company you're trying to build. Now, in our case, you're trying to build a VC backed $1 billion plus company where a lot of the value is in the larger, ACVs with bigger companies. So that could be, Series B, C, D to enterprise companies. And a lot of times like that goes top down. And like one way people do top down is typically B2B outbound sales. So, you prospect.
LinkedIn Sales Navigator.
Yeah. Like you get a huge email list of CEOs.
Did you guys do that?
We did a little bit of it.
Did it work?
Yeah, it does. It does work. The thing is, again, it just goes, everything works. It's just what's the best like thing for you. And for us, we were getting this insane return on basically these viral influencer posts.
Okay. So
then it became a filtering problem. So we would get so many people through the door. It's like, oh, we don't have to outbound prospect HubSpot. Like they just signed up organically.
Gotcha.
And now they're warm. And now I can get on a call with them much more easily.
So, okay. I want to talk about filtering, but before that,
yeah,
I think now the Twitter influencer strategy has been used enough to where we can probably talk about numbers.
Yeah. Sure.
How much were you paying for each like post and how many views was it getting? What were the general like follower counts of the people?
Yeah. I mean, dude, at certain point, so, okay, we started the very first one we did, I think minimum following we were looking at is like 20K.
Okay.
But really you don't look at you look at the following, but you look at what's sort of the average impressions that each tweet they're getting gets. And, I think we were looking at a similar thing of like, maybe they were doing like minimum 10K on each post, 20K. Yeah. Impressions. And that was like at the very start. I think we paid like $50, $100 for a couple of tweets like that.
Yeah.
And then you start to go up to, like around the 50 to 100K follower range or 50 to 100K impressions. We were paying somewhere between like $100, $200. And then all the way to like, you're talking like 1 million plus impressions. And we would typically pay like 800 to 1,000.
So you were never paying more than 1,000 or
never paying more than 1,000. And part of this was like, I think we built up a good brand with a lot of influencers.
They knew that the post would convert.
They knew that we were a good partner, that we did, honestly, a lot of our content would blow up. So they would come to us. Like we weren't, for the initial, you go prospect a bunch of people to work with. And in a way, you're sort of like selling yourself.
Yeah.
But we had so much inbound that we could basically select and kind of get better rates.
Yeah. And I remember it was easy for me then because I would just like, you would send me the influencers.
Yeah,
I'd be like, yeah, Alex sent me the introduction. I'm trying out for Ultra or Fluid or whatever.
And by the way, that same strat, like Arb's using it now.
Musicify.
And so part of it is like, it's interesting because I also, when I first started, read this like ClickFunnels book. And the ClickFunnels talks about the early arbitrage of Google Ads, where the ad platform they wanted people to advertise. So the CPMs and the cost per clicks basically were super low.
Yeah.
Then everyone finds out about it. They rush to it. All the leverage goes to Google.
Yeah.
And now they're able to drive the cost up. And so I think arbitrage in marketing is sort of short-lived. Like I'm sure there'll be, and there already is sort of like an influx into now influencers getting, a little bit saturated. But at the end of the day, I think authentic content from people you trust who have big audiences, that's always going to be sort of tried and true.
Yeah.
And so I think the moat to distribution is the relationships and the credibility that you're a good partner, your reputation, and how much quality or thoughtfulness goes into the post. Because like that authenticity can't be faked. And I think it's easily like the trust is easily lost.
Before we talk about how you were filtering once you had a lot of top of funnel,
Yeah.
did you try replicating this on TikTok? I have some friends that are making like
Right.
a lot of money
Yes.
off their like quick like SaaS products that they market on TikTok.
Yeah. Well, yes. And before I get into that, like this clicked once I saw it work for us, it worked for Musicify.
Musicify was generating like tens of millions of views a month for very cheap.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And but even take Lexica, because that's how I talked to Arb about like the timing of Musicify, why it worked. And it was very similar to the timing of Lexica, where Stable Diffusion, I think, whatever it was, I think it was 1.5, like
it just came out.
The
like
next generation, like before 1.5, images were awful.
Yeah.
1.5 comes out and it's like, whoa, like I can actually do stuff. And it came out literally that weekend and immediately went viral.
Yeah.
And so there's this thing about virality where it's sort of the unlock. I feel like if you're a startup and you're trying to back up. What are startups? Startup equals growth, right? Paul Graham, startup equals growth.
Yeah.
So if you're not explosively growing, you're not a startup. You're just a small business. You're the local
project.
mom and pop, right? If your growth rate is not 7% week over week. And so like taking that view, virality is like the lifeblood of a startup because it can propel you to, from nothing into relevancy.
Yeah.
And then you can leverage that relevancy into longer term actual distribution engines. And so that's what we did. It's basically we took this ability to go viral every week or every 2 weeks, and it made us part of the conversation. And then we leveraged that into, we just had this template go viral with Leap and Replit or Leap and Vercel or whatever, Leap and Supabase. Let's go to those brands now who have established their own distribution and their own audience, and let's do co-marketing. Let's do something on their email list. Let's do a blog post about this viral template. And then that is all tailwinds, right? So now we're getting traffic from these, our domain authority is going up. If we get thousands of clicks from this SEO that we built up, that was partnerships parlayed off of virality.
It's interesting because it's like, it wasn't a real official partnership with Vercel initially, right? It was just Vercel is one of the best options to host your site.
Yeah.
So your developers worked with Vercel, like obviously just because they used it.
Yeah.
And then you can then go to Vercel and say, hey, look, we just drove this much traffic to our product with Vercel. Absolutely. Can we get an official partnership?
Exactly.
But then suddenly you get to piggyback off of their like Google search ranking.
Right.
I think wasn't AI headshots like ranked on the first page of Google? Like
you guys
ranked
AI
for
headshots is like an incredibly competitive search term. And now that Vercel, because Vercel has incredible SEO themselves, their template, which is really our template, is like, a top 10 result
for AI headshots.
For AI headshots.
The keyword.
Yeah, the keyword, which is extremely competitive and probably in itself worth thousands in value. But the reason it works is because we're actually giving them back something in return.
Yeah.
And that is an ability to be part of the trend, part of the zeitgeist of like what's what's interesting
Yeah.
and have developer mindshare. So really it's like attention, you know, there's like that attention is all you need thing in AI right now, or that old paper. But it really is the moat for a lot of AI companies I see, where it's like they have the mind share, and the mind share can then be leveraged into more, let's call them permanent moats, which are typically in partnerships or in data. You know, if you have a lot of signups and data coming through your platform, then you can leverage that into more longstanding moat.
And so I guess it makes sense why it worked really easily for like the partnership aspect, specifically for Leap and Vercel and Supabase and Zapier.
Yeah.
Because your target demographic was developers.
Yeah.
And anyone who used Leap at that point with the product at that point had to use a version of Supabase or its competitors, a version of Vercel or its competitors.
Yeah, they're already using, they trusted those platforms.
But then how would you take that same concept and apply it to a more consumer product? So let's take Ultra, for example, which it's an email assistant that we're building, or an email product that we're building in the studio that leverages AI to like rethink email.
Right.
There is no partnership between us and Vercel because that doesn't drive anything for us.
Yeah.
How would you think about who to partner with for Ultra specifically?
Yeah. So again, it's sort of like maybe the app, you know, back up. People buy because they trust people.
100%.
Right? So I think Ultra's viral hack is actually in the email footer where it says sent with Ultra. I mean, that's how Superhuman like had their viral growth, right?
True.
And think about this. Actually, I was talking to Julian about this yesterday, where imagine if every user you acquire refers you another user.
Yeah.
If you can get that like coefficient to 1, then literally like you solved your growth problem. Because for every person you bring in, they're bringing in one person who's bringing in another person who's bringing in another person. And so I think it's sort of like a referred by Ultra. Now you can also at the same time, I think there are potentially partnerships. Like for example, in the email space, I use Spark, right? So I'm thinking like in the email space, who are the players? Like who are the cool kids?
It's like Superhuman, maybe Spark, maybe... Yeah, honestly, I would just say it's Superhuman's like cool players, like luxury software, like redone software. Yeah. It's just Superhuman in my opinion.
But like take, I don't know, Outlook, right? Like they have sort of tailwinds because they had immediate distribution because of Microsoft Office.
Right.
Or like Gmail has obviously the Google Suite. But when they were getting started, Gmail actually leveraged an invite only system. That's how they got started. I don't know if you knew this, but like they had at the time like something very novel, and that's why everyone was like. I mean,
Gmail was the first time that you could actually manage your inbox. Like you could archive things and search through things. Yeah. Whereas before it was all just like stagnant emails. You could delete it forever, but that was about it.
Right. What's interesting with Ultra is that like it seems like it's a social product. Because it's basically communication. It's like it's more to me akin to a social app than it is to a B2B in terms of what are the growth loops.
Would you consider Superhuman a social app then?
I think email as a channel is like, imagine.
It's definitely a social channel. Email is a social channel.
It's a social. So it almost like, what are the typical like consumer social sort of growth hacks? It's like people always do like invite-only systems, referrals.
Figure out how to share it from one platform to another.
Sync your contacts and let me email all your contacts, like that kind of thing. The long-term, our long-term is SEO. Yeah. And I think it's also partnerships. Yeah. For your long-term, I think is a badass referral system where like I'm getting an email and I'm like, oh, what's this Ultra thing? I click it and it becomes like Superhuman. And now I have to use it. It's just word of mouth. But to get there, I already have it's all the same stuff.
Twitter.
Everything works, but it's just like, how well does it work? Yeah. Because you could do paid and you could pour, but I don't know that would convert that great. But you could do influencer across pick your channel, right? But who's probably the person that I trust to refer me email client is probably like Thomas Frank.
Ali Abdal.
Ali Abdal.
Yeah, 100%.
Who are the productivity, like where am I getting my productivity systems from? If they're going to tell me to use Ultra, I'll probably try out Ultra.
You know what's interesting? I think a lot about like the personal brand side now of a founder, where it's specifically like, I'm trying to think of someone who does this well. there's this guy from, I think his name is Dennis from Amy. He built like a cron competitor. It's like a joyful productivity calendar. And so his thing is Amy is one of those products that's really good for like a designer or just someone that's on like the Arc, Notion, superhuman side of like the internet.
Yeah.
And he writes a lot about like, design, but also about like productivity as a founder.
Yeah.
And so in the case of Ultra, I think about digital minimalism as a cool concept.
Exactly.
Creating like a digital persona around like someone that makes content specifically that resonates with other founders / people that are in the target demographic of Ultra.
Yeah.
Or like the ICP of Ultra. Yeah. And so someone that puts out content, I guess this would be me or Joher or Abe, where it's like one of us just like commits to putting out content every single day that is like the intersection of either, your digital life, you need to simplify it if you're a founder. Here's how to manage your time as a founder. AI, like here's how to leverage your time with AI. But the question then becomes, do you focus on building out your own personal brand because then you can scale that over time for free?
Yeah.
Or do you worry about just like hitting as many people as possible through influencers?
Well, yeah. Okay, so there's a couple interesting points there. We'll get to, because I think what you just touched on is like personal brand, or do I borrow other people's
personal brands? Exactly.
Either works, I think, but initially it's faster takeoff to borrow credibility, right? So and this is another thing, another concept I love from f.inc. It's like you're always paying for something. It's either you're going to pay with your time or your money.
Yeah.
And your time might be, all right, we're going to build up our own Instagram, TikTok, whatever, Twitter brand that's going to be our audience. And I don't have to pay for every post. Like I'll have a creator I'll put on staff or whatever. Yeah. And that's fine, but it might take you 3 times as long, 6 times as long, 10 times as long to get the same reach. And so it's just a question of, am I willing to make that trade-off?
What's interesting? I also think people underestimate how, like when it comes to like advice or like figuring out what to do, I think people under-optimize for what cards they have. Like someone will go see, this worked for Arab, I'm going to do it. Whereas they have like an unlimited budget and can just dump money on ads or hire an agency to do their ads for them or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, what levers do you have to pull? That's, I think, when you look at the whole scheme of any of these strategies in growth, I think can work. I've said that like a bunch of times. The question is, what's your unique superpower?
Like, do you have a lot of capital? Do you have a network? Are you really good at content?
Exactly.
Do you already have followers?
Exactly.
All those things.
And that's so different. Like, and I think that dictates what company you build in general.
True.
But I've said this a bunch of times. Like, I didn't really realize who was equipped to build like a killer enterprise sales company until I met, I was talking to my uncle who's like in his 50s. He sold a company for like 70 million and it was all enterprise. Nice. And he basically gave me his playbook, which was he hired a bunch of sales guys from like Oracle who'd been in the industry for like 10, 15 years. And they had this book of business where they could call up any, CIO, CRO of big companies.
Book of business.
And it's called a book of business. And it's literally like, these are people who've been around, they've closed, and there's such an art to being an enterprise sales guy through and through.
Yeah.
And that's so different than if you're a 19-year-old, TikTok building public guy. Yeah. And like, that's totally fine. Both can work.
Yeah.
Like, you can build decent businesses off both. Now some churn, then you get into like, well, what customer is more valuable? Eventually like a lot of I think value, it's hard to build like a consumer thing.
All roads lead to B2B SaaS.
All roads lead to B2B SaaS. In any case, when I think about who's killing it that's our age or that's younger than 25.
Yeah.
And how have they killed it? It's the leverage if you're young is by being native to social media and knowing how to connect with what's relevant and basically build a massive audience. And if you can build a massive audience, it doesn't matter how old you are. And you've seen it, like that's how Mr. Beast, right? Like this whole trend is if you own this massive audience, which you can now very quickly get through platforms like TikTok, Instagram Reels, even, Twitter, anything. That's what gives you leverage. And from there you can, move into, like I said, partnerships, SEO, all this other stuff.
So now it's like, okay, we figured out, or we talked about how you get a bunch of people into the top of your funnel. one thing you guys had to figure out early on was just like, how do you turn these people that are now kind of in the middle of your funnel into high paying B2B companies?
Right.
How did you do that?
Yeah. So I like to call this overall strategy like a bottoms up PLG escalator.
Yeah, PLG escalator.
So PLG meaning product led growth, right? People always talk about, oh my God, Notion or Amplitude or whatnot.
Linear.
And what it means is that like these companies capture mind share through the grassroots sort of bottoms up motion. Supabase is doing this really well. Resend did this well. And then they turn that mind share into like it's like a Trojan horse that goes into different teams, and then it sort of spreads, right? So like, oh, I'm in f.inc.'s team. I'm using Leap, and I'm like, hey, like, have you checked out Leap? And you're like, nah, but like, and I'm like, here's how it works, and then you check it out. You know, that's cool. Enough people get on it, you get an enterprise contract.
I remember when all anyone would talk about was like Hotjar and Amplitude.
Yeah.
And then now I was on the phone with one of my friends earlier today that does like literally like a TikTok D2C like physical clothing company.
Yeah.
And he was like, bro, Facebook has your number. There's this thing called post hog that you need on your website.
Now post hog is like the hot thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's the approach. And I think, you know, the way that we executed on it successfully was, like I said, we were able to not just go, you know, that March moment of Elon Musk tweet, whatever, was great, but we were able to repeat that and build up an engine where we're churning out, you know, probably 50 influencer posts per month that netted us somewhere like above 10 million impressions per month.
So you were getting above 10 million impressions per month, and per month, what would you say your spend was on specifically influencer tweets?
Per month, probably 5-6K. And so we're looking at CPMs of like less than like 50 cents, like sometimes 10 cents, like, and usually CPMs are like $5.
If I could press a button,
sometimes people pay $20 CPMs on YouTube and stuff like that.
Exactly. If most like founders that had money and like they'd raised money could press a button and get spend $6,000 and get 10 million impressions.
Yeah.
It's like a no-brainer.
No-brainer. But so you take it a step further. What you really want is like, okay, the CPM is fine, but you really want the CAC to LTV to make sense.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's at the end of the day, you want to be able to put $1 into this machine, this marketing machine, and print two. You know, like that's what it's about. And so no amount of top of funnel is gonna then you have to focus on the product and make sure that the loop is is converting well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was nuts. We're still able to do it, which is pretty sweet.
You guys went through a few pivots, I remember, because early on it was like AI feature, like tool, or what was an API for building AI features.
Yeah.
Now it's a lot more kind of like refined. It's like the
no
workflows
code.
feature.
Yeah, basically.
Like we use workflows, I think now, and we use an Ultra AISF.
Yeah. So now Leap basically helps teams build no code AI powered workflows, and so those can be like internal workflows. For example, has a workflow, takes like anyone who signs up, checks their email to see if it's like a company domain. If it is, go and scrape that company's website, pull in context, use GPT to basically craft an email, and then send him a Slack of like an email draft.
Wait, what?
Yeah. But that's like an interesting one. It's basically like data automation, taking data from one place, structuring it with an LLM, running it through other AI steps, and then sending it to your Slack or sending it to your, Airtable or wherever.
Okay. So then what are some of the most useful kind of like life hack AI workflows that you've seen people build? Like the one you just mentioned, I don't know if we can leave that in.
Yeah.
But that's super cool.
Yeah, right. That's some of the most useful ones that we use. Okay, so like for example, this is what Johor's doing is he's taking, we call it content remixing. So take one piece of content, whether it's a blog, a tweet, a video, and a podcast, and basically transcribe it and remix it.
Yeah.
So I mean, you know this. If you're putting out any sort of content, like what we do is we take tweets and we turn the tweets into a product newsletter at the end of the week, which then we turn into a blog, which we could even then turn into a video.
The content
or
engine.
go backwards, right? Yeah. And so what does that look like from a workflow standpoint? It's like you could take this video, put it through a workflow that transcribes it, basically understands your tone, creates a tweet, sends it to Typefully as a draft. So then you just review it. So it's pretty crazy how you can essentially automate your copywriting and content generation all through workflows.
You know what's cool? I think this is unrelated, but it's something I've been thinking about a lot. And I think that workflows, versions of workflows and Leap are going to be the thing that enables this.
Yeah.
In the last few years, we've started to see a rise of these like 20-something-year-old run media companies. Like there's like these Instagram accounts that like write, like just do news or like kind of cultural things. They have millions of followers. Like I think about, there's this one, it's just called @Muslim on Instagram.
Yeah.
And it's like, if I go and I follow like 500-600 people, if I go look at it, like I'll have 250 mutuals. Like almost every Muslim person I know follows it.
Yeah.
And there's like versions of that for like rap, for hip hop culture, or for, actually I haven't seen any in tech, but like there's versions of it.
Yeah.
But the problem is right now, any of those accounts can just get delisted if the platform decides that they should get delisted.
Yeah.
And I think people talk about, if you have a personal brand, you need to have an email newsletter because that's the only way you own your audience.
Yeah.
I think the next level of that is actually people will start to own their own media, like news outlets. Because now what you're saying, it's like you're talking about remixing. You can give workflows to a kid that's smart, like a 16-year-old, like you said, that's native. He grew up on social media. She grew up on social media, whatever. And now they could build their own news. They could build their own media company, whatever it is. And they can create information in a way where people trust them and they consume their content. Because the other thing is, if you look at Twitter, people are starting to lose faith in like the general like news outlets as a whole. And it's like, this feels like a solution to that, where now people, sure, there's questions of like, oh, can you trust the people running the media companies? But I think at a core level, there's something to be said about like the creator economy moving towards a place where people own their own businesses. Now I think there's something to be said about the creator economy moving to a place where people own their entire audience. Yeah. And like they own their distribution much beyond just, I have an Instagram and a TikTok and a YouTube with the same handle.
Yeah.
And I think workflows is actually like, that's the missing link between being able to use AI through ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And then being able to now make videos and photos and, and automatically generate news like banners and also do news articles and full length, like short tweets, everything.
Yeah, exactly. We were just talking about this. The real value of like LLM as a paradigm shift is not just LLM. It's LLM plus your data. And that is true for the individual and it's true for the company. So meaning like LLM plus, here's my whole Twitter, learn how I talk and how I tweet and be able to replicate that tone and replicate what I would say, and actually go take a look at Sahil Bloom's tweets and now add some of that into it. And for the enterprise, it's like upload, my docs, upload whatever, my resources. So it's LLM plus data. And then we take it a step further and we say it's LLM plus data plus integrations. Because if you can basically connect, LLMs that are trained on your own data and then use, integrations to send that data all across the web, that's sort of the promise of the GPT store. Yeah. But I don't think that it'll be, rather than it being everything comes to GPT, I think it'll be, no, like we're gonna bring GPT to everything else. Yeah.
Like, dude, I literally sent a tweet earlier today in like the Studio General channel, and I was like, how useful would it be for me to just get John's, who runs Fluid, and Joher's or my like own tweet data as a CSV, like export it from Twitter, and then throw in a little bit of like, here's Ali Abdal, talking about productivity for Ultra. Yep. Here's a little bit of like Palmer Luckey talking about the future of VR, or even just straight John's tweets. Yep. To then have repeatable personal brand content engines that can repeatedly churn out content.
Exactly it.
There's something to be said about like, oh, I don't want like everyone's tweets on my timeline to be half AI generated. I want to see, and I'm sure this is going to swing the other way where it's like, all my content is completely non-AI generated. But for the purpose of like building a business or building a company around your personal brand, there's so much to like that needs to be productized. Absolutely. Around specifically bringing GPT to other parts.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because we see like a lot of marketing or ops, like Joher, for example. Joher's more like ops, general ops. And we see use cases like that internally, like, Live Nation's an interesting one where like
What's Live Nation?
they created a workflow that trained an image model on concert photography.
Oh, that Live Nation.
Yeah, and then generate assets for, you know, your marketing team or, you know, your website even.
Yeah.
Inflection AI, we saw do the same. And then we also have use cases where like we're powering full backends of consumer apps.
Yeah.
And that's where, you know, like the headshots, avatars, music files, like those apps come into play. And so it's interesting where Leap's going. But yeah, right now we're definitely targeting more of a sort of no code persona, but that's still a builder. And that's really trying to leverage the new AI things plus their existing integrations to automate their work.
So right now, Leap generates, I think I can say this, like 500K a year. Is that the public number?
Roughly, yeah.
Okay. What is your plan to get from 500K a year? Because, you know, you said the scoreboard
Absolutely.
is 500K.
Yeah.
So what's your plan to get from 500K a year to like, you know, let's say, what is it, like 2 million a year is like the next milestone?
Our goal for this upcoming year is to finish somewhere between 3 and 5 million a year.
And what are you going to do?
And I think it's very simple.
Okay.
So basically, the way I see that is we already know all the like we already have everything I talked about from being able to very profitably acquire customers down. Now it's about that escalator. So we were talking about filtering.
Yeah.
So do you have the systems in place so you're flagging, you know, the interesting people as they come in, sign up, as they come in organically and sign up, to immediately throw them into a drip campaign that's trying to, you know, get them on a call, activate them, make sure that they get to success. Once they do get to success, upsell them on, you know, all the things that enterprise or bigger companies care about, which are much more around, you know, can my whole team have visibility into my workflows? Do I have security and SSO? Do I have audit logs? Or do I have a dashboard that shows my metrics? Do I have really reliable performance and stability?
Yeah.
And so for us, it's now about, okay, how do we just optimize that engine?
Yeah.
Which is the escalator. And so I see it as continue to double down there and find our next 3 to 5 killer use cases. So what killed it for us this past year was really, I would say, use cases around fine-tuning image models. And I think we were the best sort of in the market to do that. Obviously there's like, you could do it on Replicate, you could do it on, there's a few other sites that let you fine-tune image models, but Leap brought it to sort of the consumer the best.
Yeah.
And we crushed it with that. And that's where you saw all the use cases around avatars, headshots, even product photography and sort of like uploading my design system and then being able to produce like icons or things like that. So I think for us getting to 3 to 5, very simple. It's just finding the next, 3 to 5 use cases.
So what's cool is that you make 500K a year, but your team is only what, like 3 people, 4? I don't know what it's at
I guess,
right now.
Like with f.inc, so it's 3 full-time on Leap, and then we also have support from f.inc, but it is very small for the output that we're doing.
Yeah. What is the split generally of work? Because you're an engineer. Like when I met you,
so
you
we're
were
all
coding,
engineers, yeah.
But then you also do growth.
Yeah, so one, I think we use Leap workflows ourselves, which is sort of the hack, right? So for example, like I have workflows that generate our tweets and everything I talked about from our marketing standpoint. Even I have workflows that help write tweets for influencers, or we talked about not just tweets, but pick a platform, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. Our workflows help augment me in producing that content. And then, I guess from a distribution of work standpoint, I'm typically more on the growth side. Claudio's more on the product side, but we both do both. So sometimes he comes and he helps, whatever it is, pull the levers on growth. And sometimes I go and I'm in the code and helping sort of patch UX stuff. I think that's sort of also an indication of where the future of work is going, which is smaller teams, more, more generalists, especially in the early stage. It's almost like these band of like people say like Navy SEALs, like the Navy SEAL teams versus these, before. Huge orgs.
Yeah, 100%.
And you're augmented by AI and workflows that, we happen to be building.
Yeah. I mean, what's cool is I feel like a lot of these teams that say they have like, oh, I have 3 full-time employees have like 8 online overseas contractors that they pay $200 a month to. But you guys don't do that.
Right. Well, we do have we do have some augmented for like customer support and stuff, but no.
Right. But I mean, like there are guys that like have 8-person engineer teams that all make $400 a month.
No. Yeah, I guess the thing about it is I think that there's a lot of problems. Most problems in early stage startups you can't solve with headcount, with just adding more people to and in fact, I think that typically adds to the problem.
Less headcount.
It's more overhead. It's more managing and less producing. It's like the smaller the team, I really think the sweet spot is like 3 to 5 people pre PMF. Yeah. And then once you do fine PMF, like, okay, maybe you go to 12.
Yeah.
But like look at Midjourney, right? They're doing 200 million a year with 11
people.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So
I guess one thing that's interesting to me is specifically from an engineering perspective.
Yeah.
How do you guys actually how do you think about who's working on what gets shipped per week? And then like, just how do you like divide tasks?
Yeah. So this has taken a bit to iterate, but we pulled in a lot of inspiration from Michael Seibel and YC. And what they say is like top of every week, basically pick your KPI. So okay, like maybe let's back up because there's gonna be some people who are like, even before that, they're sort of like, I have an idea for a product or like I want to build. And at that point, it's just like, get your core loop down. Like that's another framework is like, what's your minimum viable loop? Loop means I'm a person. I'm coming to use this thing because you promised me some output. You
like some ad, there was some ad, there was some like,
exactly.
some
Ads
content.
are just promises. Yeah. They're like, in your case, you're going to save me X amount of time with my email.
Sure.
Right. And then I come to your app and you have very little time to prove to me that you actually do what you promised me.
Yeah.
You do. So when you have no loop, you need a loop. Okay. Then once you have a loop, your A+ begins to be measuring. So get a scoreboard. And if you have no one converting, then you're just tracking the funnel, meaning like, okay, how many people signed up? How many people then, logged in? How many people went from the login page and, like read an email?
Sure.
How many people logged in, how many times a day? We have one meeting. That meeting goes as long as it takes. But what we do is we basically say, okay, here's the most important KPI to move this week. So that could be, it's always revenue related, right?
Something's broken in the funnel. Like someone doesn't convert.
Yeah, exactly. It could be that, exactly. Like there's, like a few weeks ago was performance. It's like, we can't have any outages, downtime, nothing. It's got to be, performance has to be 100% like spot on.
Yeah.
It could be like we need to add more use cases. Like we need to find the next killer use case.
Y'all needed to get an image generator that took 3 seconds to load the image.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It could be that images are taking way too long to load.
What was that? Like 2 months ago? Like 1 month ago?
Yeah, that was a while back. It could be, any host of things, but you got to pick your A+. Like what's the A+ problem? And then what's the KPI that's going to measure that? And for us, it's always revenue. So it might be like conversion rate. It might be like, average revenue per user. Pick your thing. And then it's just a brainstorm on the product side of what are all of the things that we could do to fix this. Yeah. And they're typically like a long list of maybe bugs or just known blockers. And if you have a loop that's already sort of working, then what we got into was this rhythm of every week we're going to do a big swing.
Yeah.
Big swing means what's the product ship that could potentially 10x the number?
You do that every week?
At one point once we had our loop down.
Okay.
So it's like, and when I say your loop down, if your product is a self-serve, like I can sign up and I can put a credit card in, and you're not converting, and you're sub 1% conversion, your loop
doesn't work.
Sucks. You need to work on your loop. Okay. If you're between 1 and 5%, keep optimizing it. All right. Keep optimizing your loop. If you get to 4 or 5%, then I think you can start to say, what are the big swings? And the big swings are like almost new offerings or, new promises that might be more compelling or that might be, and so we do a big brainstorm of that. Everyone involved, everyone's in one room, everyone gets a say in the brainstorm. Then once we're done with that, we basically all choose, okay, if we can only do 3 things for the whole week, what are those 3 things? So pick 1, 2, 3. And that's how and then we converge and we basically say, and like, okay, if everyone picks the wrong, basically then you make your case for why is this thing the thing if there's disagreement. But usually that's enough to settle on, okay, here are the items. And then we do the same thing on the growth side. So it's all part of the same meeting. Yeah. It's like, what are all the growth initiatives we could do to 10x the business, basically? Yeah. Or move that number. And same thing, huge brainstorm, and then and a lot of times we scrap, and then basically once it's settled, it's settled. Like we're not renegotiating.
Like you're not going to change your entire linear board of to-dos for the week in the middle of the week.
No. It's like that's set until the next Monday meeting. Yeah. And then you get to renegotiate that next Monday meeting.
The biggest thing for me in this experiment that I'm kind of running in the studio right now was I was talking to Abe about just engineering workflows, and he said the same thing. I guess this comes from, I didn't realize this came from YC, where it was don't add to-dos in the middle of the week unless it's something literally broke in production. Yeah. Because otherwise it's from an engineer's perspective, it's a never ending battle that they're just they don't even know what to work on. But the priorities are broken. Right. Whereas now it's we do the same thing. We did this earlier today. It's Monday when we're filming this. It's we sat down in the morning, me and Amir, and it was okay, we looked back at, here's everything that we figured out last week. We looked at post-hog. Right. We saw all of the leaky buckets. We saw where the drop-off was the most. We looked at Sentry, where the most errors were getting reported. And then we came up with this list, and we noticed we started doing this for the last few weeks. We're getting through things that used to take us 1 or 2 weeks in 2 or 3 days. Yeah. To the point where we get to the middle of the week and sometimes we're okay, there's literally nothing else to run. We'll just run another set of experiments and figure out what changed in the last 3 days. And we're getting so much more done now.
Exactly. And then you finish everything early. All right.
Move on
now your cycle's 3 days. Now you have another meeting and because the most important thing is figuring out what to work on.
100%.
It's not actually once you wind up the doll and put it in the direction, that's the easy part. It's the hard part is knowing which direction to put it in.
100%. And I think that's also the biggest value I think of having investors early on, or at least having studio models are cool. I'm obviously biased. Yeah. But also having people that you're working with, even if you're a founder that's building a solo company, just being alongside other founders as you guys are all building your companies together. Yeah. You get so deep into just your head being down, just in code or in design, that you just forget to zoom out and see what actually matters.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, the hard thing is startups, if you make one wrong move, you die. And so it's actually much more about that's why, having someone who's done the whole journey and had a company get acquired is just, I think, the tried and true way. It's why YC companies, are able to, I think, help their founders through a 100%.
lot. If we even look at what's happening downstairs, the companies that we see kind of come through f.inc. Yeah. If you look at Julian with Wisdolia, I'm going to have him on, I think, next week or the week after. Yeah. He just put out that tweet. They went from no revenue to also, I think their number was 325K a year. Yeah. For a consumer education product. And they did the same strategy that more or less the same strategy that you did with Twitter, that Arb did with TikTok, that Lexica did. I actually don't know what they did with, was it Twitter?
I think they were on Reddit.
Yeah. That Lexica did with Reddit. Yeah. And now they're doing it on TikTok and it worked. Yeah. And I think that those are things that you really only get when you're surrounded by people that are going at a problem as hard as you are. Yep. That's also I think Mr. B said this too. He was he did a lot of his early days building content. It was just him alone in his mom's room. Yep. Whereas eventually when he got serious about it, it's like you're surrounded by a bunch of people that are going 100% at the same thing. You all learn from each other's mistakes. You all see what works for each other, and you move so much faster than if you're like, I have this idea that no one can know about because it's going to make me a billionaire.
Yeah.
And you see so many of those.
To your point, yeah, like for example, we all swap, I'll call them trade secrets all the time.
100%.
You know, and that's like
with the Reddit thing you guys told me about today.
Yeah, like the
it's
Reddit
game
thing.
over next week.
Obviously, like there's the Twitter stuff, but you know, the concept, it's really interesting, right? Like the concept of like influencers. Like influencers are everywhere. It's just who do you follow on a platform that you trust, and that has a big, that's built an audience.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say that could be. Those are like the meme pages, theme pages. Like those are also valid sources of traffic and influence.
Yeah.
And then the other strat that's sort of like part and parcel with that is affiliate. And so, you know, a lot of influencers, they don't love to just do like the affiliate model, but that's how you can build, like, if you want to build a true like media engine, you're not just paying per post, you're owning, or you're incentivizing, like built into the incentive structure is a reason to continue to promote you. And in the case of affiliates, it's like
that's the Hustler University model.
It's like, the Hustler, exactly.
Andrew Tate, his product was his podcast clips, and his product was Hustler University, and he incentivized people to shill his product by posting clips and linking to his product, and then giving them a percentage of whatever they brought in. Yeah,
exactly.
Musicify did the same thing.
Tabs, I think also.
Tabs chocolate,
yeah, they did the same thing. Versus like, I don't know, you know, everything can work, right? It's just like choose straight up. KO does a little bit differently, where they, you know, they're hiring creators. They found a format. So like
the street interviews.
Finding content's really interesting, because it's like you pick your sort of thing. Like, am I gonna go pay for influencer posts, or am I gonna like build up my own content myself? Yeah. And then either way, you're trying dozens of experiments per week, meaning like one experiment is like, I'm going to do interview style clips. Another experiment is like, I'm going to do a clip of like Minecraft in the background with like, you know,
the podcast,
with a podcast,
the dude jumping
talking.
in a Subway Surfer.
You know, another one is like, I'm going to do, first person like POV of like, I don't know, like me opening, like just some organic thing, or like how Jason does it, where like someone's like recording from like,
he yells at people, the My Tech CEO.
Yeah. But it's framed, it's shot from this place of like, you know, you're getting a view that you're not supposed to. Yeah. And anyway, each one of these content like things are experiments. You're going to find the one, if you do enough experiments, you're going to find the format that pops off, and you're going to be able to arbitrage it for a little bit, and then you got to find the next one.
100%.
And that's the game. Yeah. But it's, I think the last thing I'll say is, for people our age, that is the leverage. Is like, can you build a big engaged audience quickly? And you can with socials nowadays. And so I find myself like thinking, well, there's not like that many places that will give you that same input to output ROI.
Dude, right now it feels like I wasn't very deep into like the drop shipping space, but right now it feels like we have the same opportunity to create generational wealth that kids our age did 4 years ago, when Facebook ads and drop shipping was making people millionaires. Because of AI? I just think the space is operating similar with like, you know, you don't have to put that much in to get the same results out. The same way with Facebook ads and drop shipping, you didn't have to put that much in to get the same results out. Interesting. I mean, I might potentially, I think like TikTok used to be super, like that's the thing is like, it actually was easier, I think much easier before on TikTok to build your own account up. Mm-hmm. Now I think Reels is the place where, I mean, just like building wealth in general through content, through distribution, and content. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I mean, I'll stick to that point of like, I think Reels is the place because these platforms go through cycles themselves. 100%. And it's like Reels came out the most recently, and it's competing with TikTok, and it's trying to do video, Reels and Shorts. Mm-hmm. And so their whole incentive was like drive people to those things. Eventually those are going to get saturated, and there's going to be a new
place.
Like we thought Threads was going to beat out Twitter because we thought that Threads would get as much of a boost as Reels did against TikTok, but against Twitter. And well, that didn't happen, but
yeah. I think there's one other thing before I forget it. I wanted to mention the way that we bootstrapped the Zapier partnership, because I think it's a great story. We initially put out a tweet. It was like, we partnered with Zapier, and it was just like our Zapier integration, which pretty much anyone can make a Zapier integration.
Wait, did I write that? Was that the one we did over there? Where this was like the first ever in person. Like this was the first hackathon you ever did.
Yeah, first ever.
I remember that.
So yeah, remember? So we put out that tweet, and then we noticed that Zapier was having this thing they called the No Code Hackathon.
I remember.
And they were giving away 5K, and we basically piggybacked off of that, and we said we're hosting the Leap Zapier hackathon, and we created all the materials, and we got like hundreds of people to participate and build something on Leap and Zapier, and then tweet out to submit their projects. Yeah. They had to tweet out and tag Leap and Zapier.
I remember this, yeah.
And so we got like, at least dozens of submissions, all tagging Zapier with these looms of their demos. Some
marketing manager was there. He was probably like, oh, who are
and
these
they
guys?
Were like blown away. They were like, what? And we parlayed. We were like, the Leap Zapier hackathon, you're going to get 5K in cash prizes, which was just Zapier's thing. And then 1,000 in Leap credits. And and then we had everyone submit Zapier's form. Yeah. And from then they were like, oh yeah, Leap's cool. That basically is how we bootstrap the partnership. And so I think the overall takeaway is when you have nothing, you have to recognize like, what's your superpower? Do you have any leverage?
Is it money? Is it time? Is it content?
Exactly,
is it capital?
Exactly.
Is it your network?
Right? Like, don't overthink the channel. If you're building a personal brand, I think just pick whatever channel, works for you. I will say that there definitely is nuances between the channels. Like Twitter is absolutely where like tech startup people hang out. I think Twitter and YouTube sort of are where those people are. Maybe a little bit in Discord, but Discord is more of like the crypto people. Still developers are in Discord.
The courses.
So many courses. Yeah. And then you have Reddit, which is sort of like also it's an interesting crowd on Reddit.
I actually don't know. I don't know how I would place Reddit.
Definitely like a lot of devs. It's very like internet native people. It's like, so you still get like sort of crypto dev type, but then you also get like there's like Fat Fire, and there's like like people really interested in finance, and they have really communities for a lot of things. But you sort of like you pick sort of which. LinkedIn obviously great for if you're doing sort of like a more B2B bottoms up play with content. So I wouldn't overthink it. You just start putting out content. Like I said, you got to run dozens of experiments a week. Eventually you're going to hit that format that works. And that's when you double down. You really hit it. And eventually when things are good, you also got to be running experiments, because things will level off again and you'll have to find the next, like arbitrage or format that's really working. So that's sort of like the mental model, I think, with organic content.
Okay. So to end things off then, we'll do one last like kind of like brainstorm.
Yep.
Let's say let's say a 21-year-old hasn't raised any money.
Yep.
And he's building a company like Resend. So it's like a developer tool for people to send emails to their customers, like through their product. Like when you sign in and it sends an email, or when someone completes a product flow, it sends them an email.
Yeah.
How would you think about coming up with like a marketing plan for that?
Yeah. So one thing we didn't touch on yet is like every product is going to have like, I call it advertising. And then there's like product education.
Okay.
And you asked this question about Ultra, where should I like create my own account, talk about productivity, and like basically shill Ultra? Like, yes and no. I think you should absolutely be incorporating product education, meaning like, here's Ultra. Here's how it's bettering my life today.
Sure.
And it's just like content like that all the time. In the case of a developer tool like Resend or like Leap, all the time we were talking about, here's basically the model for how you build stuff with it. so like, let's take Resend. Like, I think a core part of the strategy would be like DevRel or developer relations really is that. It's like, how do you teach someone with tutorials? A lot of times it's like YouTube tutorials, or it's like blog posts that are like step 1, NPM I, step 1, NPM I Resend. Step 2, like, plug it into your Next.js app. And it's literally just like walking someone through how you actually get value out of the product. And so I think that a steady flow of that, which honestly buckets into the developer experience. Like, a big part of it is how do you connect back to how do you win? And I think for developer tools, if you're going bottoms up, then the strategy is really DevX. Like, how do I have the best DevX? And that includes that developer education piece. And then how do I just capture the most developer mindshare? And so that could be lots of other, we talked about a bunch of strategies. I guess we didn't talk too much about SEO. I think there's one like kind of secret tidbit I give. So, okay, SEO is basically 2 things. It's one, how trusted is your site by Google, which is like domain authority. So if you go to like ahrefs.com, put in your site, you're going to see like what's your domain authority or domain reputation. And 2 is, are you putting out content that's capturing high ranking but low competitive keywords? Mm-hmm. So, the way to do that is basically, I think what we've done well is we've built up high authority through these like brand partnerships. For example, when Zapier links you, or when, like who's a big one, like press, any sort of press that links to your site, very good. Then what you want to do is you got to put out the same way you're doing content experiments on social, you do content experiments on a blog. And so that's like that's dozens of experiments, different content. You go on Ahrefs, you look up like, I might look up AI image, and it'll show me a bunch of relevant terms to AI image. And then you can do long tail. So AI image, and it might be like AI image people, AI image pets, AI image, like insert your like variable use long cases, tail thing. Yeah. And you basically make a list of like, what are the top 50 terms that you want to go and capture. Mm-hmm. And then you put out lots of content and keep experimenting. And that's really SEO. I think the hack is now, again, with AI powered workflows, like we have an SEO template where you can plug in, here's my website, here are the keywords I want to target. Here's like a blog post that's ranking really highly for this keyword right now. Generate me.
Send me that. I need that.
Yeah. I'll send it to you.
Fire.
Sick.
So I'm going to ask you one last question.
Yeah.
And then we're going to wrap.
Yeah. If
we were to do this podcast again in a year, what would you want to have accomplished by then for you to consider it a win?
Okay. 1 year from now. Leap. Like I said, my big goal for the year is honestly 3 to 5 million ARR end of the year, raise Series A, keep building. That's like honestly my one thing. That is the one thing I'm focused on. Otherwise, I think this past year's been pretty incredible. Like there's not much that's better than getting to wake up every day, work with people you really admire, love working with, who are super talented, and just get to build build a company. Like building a company, I think, is such a privilege. I really wake up every day, I'm like, wow, I can't believe that we get to do this. We get to meet incredible people too. Like we've met everyone who used to look up to, or I used to look up to, from the East Coast on Twitter, and like now, like a lot of them are my friends, and like I hang out with them in SF, and yeah, that's just, I think it's part how do you enjoy the journey, and then it's part like how do you make this just insanely big and valuable, and keep winning.